Because my attitude is a Kenny Pickett, a Dylan Gabriel, a Tyler Huntley, that should not be enough to derail Shedeur Sanders. To me, you're legitimately competing for the QB2. But I do view him as somebody who could position himself to be that QB2. And if he's not in that position, but he's playing well, we know that the reason that would be the case is because they don't want people clamoring for Shedeur Sanders prematurely.
Yeah, I agree. It's a stair-step process. The first step that he took was in the preseason game as far as bunching his name in the bunch with the guys that are playing.
Stephen A. Smith didn't mince words. He went straight after Kevin Stefanski, calling the entire situation a manufactured controversy. According to Stephen A., Connor Stefanski deliberately pushed the Shedeur's injured storyline to make it seem like the young QB isn't really part of the team's future plans. He accused Stefanski of working to hold Shedeur back and called the sudden oblique injury talk nothing more than a smokescreen. But Stephen A. didn't stop there. He took it a step further, suggesting this may have been orchestrated from even higher up, implying that ownership could be pulling the strings, with Stefanski simply carrying out the plan. In his eyes, this isn't just bad coaching, it's a calculated move to control the narrative and keep Sanders out of the spotlight.
Amount of work that we've seen. And that comes with going up against competition. Of course, second and third units and all of that stuff come into play. But when you're the reigning defending Super Bowl champions, had he shown up this weekend and balled out again, playing 45 or more snaps like he did in the first game and putting up similar, if not better numbers, I think that would have boded very, very well for him.
Stephen A. emphasized that it was obvious. If Shedeur Sanders had been allowed to replicate his last standout performance, Stefanski and the team's ownership would have had no choice but to put him on the field. In Stephen A. Titter's words, Shedeur's talent and momentum were undeniable, and his rise to QB2 and eventually QB1 was inevitable. That's why, according to him, this sudden injury story was no accident. He called it a perfectly timed obstacle, deliberately placed to derail Shedeur's momentum. In his view, this wasn't Stefanski acting alone. It was all being orchestrated by ownership, with Stefanski doing their bidding. And honestly, Stephen A. might have a point, because at this stage, it's no longer just about an oblique injury. It's about the timing and the way it all unfolded just days after the game. Kevin Stefanski faced the media right after the hype explosion and downplayed the idea that Shedeur was even in serious contention for the starting job. He stressed the idea of developing all the quarterbacks equally. On the surface, it sounded fair and balanced until the official depth chart was released. That's when everything shifted, revealing a twist that left fans questioning the real motives behind the Browns' decision-making.
We know how the game goes. But then he starts talking about the offense, right? 0 giveaways. Okay, this is when you're supposed to insert Shedeur, some fans think. Let's talk.
Okay, special teams, Pookie, takeaway.
The biggest takeaway? Even after Shedeur Sanders delivered what many are calling the best quarterback performance of the entire preseason, Kevin Stefanski still put him fourth on the depth chart. And here's where things got even stranger. Both Dylan and Pickett were injured at the time, yet Sanders was ranked behind them. That decision didn't just raise eyebrows, it completely defied logic, adding fuel to the rumors that something else is going on behind the scenes in Cleveland. Shedeur himself didn't stay quiet after seeing that depth chart. He called it out directly, pointing out that being a fifth-round pick shouldn't automatically dictate where he sits on the roster, especially after proving himself on the field. Stephen A. echoed that exact same point, making it clear that putting Sanders at number 4 had nothing to do with football reality. In his eyes, the decision wasn't based on merit at all. It was a predetermined label, handed to Shedeur not because he earned it, but because that's where they wanted him from day one.
What your position is on the depth chart at the start of the season as opposed to the start of training camp and ultimately preseason. Because what happens is that they had him in that position before he competed, before he had a chance to prove himself. It's not like they walked in there and they said, okay, y'all competed, and as a result of what we've seen, we've got you as the QB4. No, you came in there and that's where they placed you.
Just when it seemed the situation couldn't get any messier, new reports emerged claiming that Stefanski has no plans to play Shedeur Sanders in the second preseason game. That revelation only intensified the controversy. Despite Sanders' standout showing, it's becoming increasingly clear that he may not be part of the Browns' immediate plans, at least not in the role supporters and analysts expected. This raises a pressing question. Is this a calculated strategic decision, or is there something more personal driving these choices? And now, out of nowhere, Sanders is reportedly injured. The timing is hard to ignore. Just as the calls to get him on the field were reaching a fever pitch, the Browns appeared to be looking for ways to slow the momentum. When no other explanation seemed to fit, they labeled it arm soreness, an issue they claimed would be resolved by the next day. But that explanation only deepens the doubts. Is this truly a legitimate injury, or is it a convenient excuse to keep Sanders off the field while the pressure mounts? Even Stefanski himself acknowledged that Sanders' recovery might take a little longer than usual, emphasizing caution because it involves a crucial muscle group. Yet the way Stefanski phrased his remarks, the subtle hesitation, the careful choice of words only fueled uncertainty. Each statement felt calculated, as though he was deliberately avoiding full disclosure. His unwillingness to lay everything out plainly makes it increasingly difficult to believe we're seeing the full picture, leaving the impression that there is far more to this situation than he is willing to reveal.
Unfortunately, going to put him down for a little bit here. We'll treat it day to day and see how he responds, but want to be smart because he's a thrower, so you can't push it.
Stephen A. argued that the Browns' moves aren't just about injuries or depth charts. He sees them as a calculated effort to silence the growing chorus of voices calling for Shedeur Sanders. According to him, the team witnessed the wave of support and excitement that built around Sanders after his first game, and instead of letting that momentum continue, it made them uneasy. In Stephen A.'s view, the organization is actively working to slow it down, keeping Sanders out of sight to prevent his name from dominating conversations. This isn't about strategy, development, or caution. It's about controlling the narrative and making sure Sanders doesn't become the force that fans, analysts, and even opposing teams already recognize him to be.
But I do view him as somebody who could position himself to be that QB2. And if he's not in that position, but he's playing well, we know that the reason that would be the case is because they don't want people clamoring for Shedeur Sanders prematurely.
The reason this is happening seems clear. The Browns don't want people clamoring for Shedeur Sanders prematurely. What started as a simple depth chart debate or an injury update has now evolved into a full-blown controversy, layered with speculation, suspicion, and frustration. From Stephen A. Smith's fiery accusations against Coach Stefanski to the oddly timed arm soreness announcement, every new development seems to raise more questions than it answers. Sanders' preseason performance was strong enough to make a compelling case for a bigger role, yet the Browns' decisions tell a different story. Ranking him fourth on the depth chart despite other quarterbacks being sidelined with injuries and reportedly sitting him out of the second preseason game sends a clear message, one that seems completely at odds with his on-field results. Stephen A. has been unequivocal. This isn't about Sanders' abilities. It's a deliberate effort to slow his momentum. The timing of announcements, the carefully chosen language in press conferences, and the reluctance to provide straight answers all point to a controlled narrative. When fans saw Sanders shine in his first game, they rallied behind him, and according to Stephen A., that is exactly what the organization wants to avoid. Instead of capitalizing on the excitement, the Browns appear to be pumping the brakes, perhaps to protect pre-existing plans or avoid internal conflict over roster decisions. Their insistence on caution and the vague updates about Sanders' condition have only fueled speculation. Is this strategic misdirection or simply poor management? If it's strategy, it's a risky one. Alienating both the fan base and a rising star could have long-lasting consequences. If it's personal, the organization risks undermining its own credibility. Either way, one thing is certain, this story isn't going away anytime soon. Until the Browns are transparent and allow Sanders to truly compete based on merit, the whispers of hidden agendas will only grow louder. So what do you think is really happening here? Is this genuinely about protecting Shedeur Sanders' health, or is the injury narrative just a convenient excuse to keep him off the field? Do you believe Coach Stefanski is simply following orders from the front office, or is he personally invested in keeping Sanders from moving up the depth chart? Is this part of a bigger strategic plan, or are we witnessing politics and personal agendas taking priority over performance? Most importantly, if Sanders continues to be sidelined despite proving himself, how long will fans remain silent?